The storm doesn't start with thunder. It starts with a pressure, a hand on the back of the neck, the air thick as old honey. Caleb Hart cuts the engine, and the pickup's ticking cool becomes the only sound. A small machine catching its breath after a long confession. Beside him, Jonah watches the barn through the windshield like it might decide to move. The building lists against the hill, ribs showing through weathered boards. Roofline collapsed into a posture that says both surrender and stubbornness. It has stood through auctions and neglect, through 4 owners who never came back after signing, through the kind of winter that breaks things you thought were permanent. Feels wrong to enter a place that's already grieving, Jonah says. His voice is raw from a life recently reduced to quiet. Caleb answers with motion. He shoves the door and steps out into rain that comes warm, then cold, then warm again as the front reorganizes above the ridge. Mud sucks at his boots with the possessiveness of a place acquainted with need. The barn door is a slab swollen by seasons, its iron strap rusted to a color like dried blood. He presses his palm and feels it, a tremor that isn't wind, not sound, vibration. The barn, humming to itself. They lever the beam free with a crowbar and their grief-made shoulders. Inside, darkness breathes. Dust hangs in a patient congregation, drifting toward the cones of their flashlights. The smell is old rope, mouse musk, grease rendered sweet with time, the green acid tang of wet hay, and under it all the mineral chill of stone after rain. A stuttering drip marks time from the far corner. "Look," Jonah whispers. The beam of his light strikes a ladder up to the loft, rungs worn to profiles by feet that never belonged to them. Next to the ladder carved waist-high, a shape, not initials, not numbers. A circle pierced by a triangle, a mark as clean as if cut yesterday. The oddness lands in them like a question that's been waiting years to be asked. They climb. The loft hums. The sensation stronger here, building through the boards into their bones. In a beam's shadow, swallowed by the slope of the roof, a wall panel doesn't match the wood around it. The grain runs wrong. Caleb thumbs the seam. It wiggles a 1/4 inch and sticks. He slides the pry bar in and eases. The board tips forward on a disguised hinge and exhales air as cold as a root cellar. Inside, a narrow chamber, tall as a coffin, stood upright and twice as wide. Racks, boxes the size of hat cases lined with tin, labels written in a hand that draws each letter like it's a promise. Nocturne, Reel 1 to 6. Prairie Night, Outtakes. Heart, Private. Caleb touches the nearest lid with the caution of a man approaching a sleeping animal. The metal shivers under his fingers. The barn's hum resolves into something his body understands before his brain does. A generator, small and reliable, still working somewhere in the wall. He sees it then, tucked behind a false post. A box with a hummingbird's heart, and a thermostat dial set low. The chamber is cold, not by accident. Deliberate. Preserved. "What is this?" Jonah asks. His light catches a cloth-wrapped tube in the back of the cabinet, sealed with twine and wax gone soft with decades. On the wax, pressed once and clean, the same circle and triangle sigil. Caleb says it aloud, because the sound makes the world admit it's real. Film. Morning arrives like a shy apology. The storm slips off the ridge. A fog-like breath pools in the swales. The land they've bought is the kind you apologize to out loud even when you're alone. 70-some acres of thin soil and good light, a creek grown stingy, a house that leans into itself as if tired of being looked at. It went cheap because everyone around here knows better than to pay for the privilege of hard work. Caleb and Jonah paid anyway. Widowers need projects you can hold in 2 hands. They need tasks that answer back, even if the answer is no. Grief has rearranged them. On Jonah it hangs like a heavy coat left on in July because there's no one to tell him he's sweating. On Caleb it has planed edges and square corners. He has cut away what didn't fit and built with what remained. They lost different women to different fights with the same outcome, and they do not speak of hospitals anymore. They speak about fence posts and septic lines. They measure time in chores and coffee. They did not come for mystery. They came to pound something stubborn into place until it stayed put. Yet from the first step into the barn, the land offered them a different kind of work. Hidden in the loft wall, embalmed in cold air, sat a quiet that wasn't empty. The tins felt important in the hand before they proved it. The labels hadn't bled. The ink was the same blue your grandfather's ledger used when his pen's nib was right and the paper gave. Before we spool any further, if you love stories that smell like wet wood and old paper, If you like your mysteries built with screws and weather and the kind of secrets that ask for patience, hit subscribe and drop in the comments where you're watching from. It helps this channel find its people. Tell us what barns looked like in your childhood, what they kept, what they whispered when you were sure you were alone. Share this with someone who knows that the past doesn't disappear. It settles into the grain until you learn how to read it. Back in the loft, Caleb sets one tin on the floor and pops the clasps. Inside, nested in tissue gone translucent with oil, a coil of film asleep for a century. The smell is unmistakable, sweet and solvent like pears left too long in a warm kitchen, like history trying to combust. A paper sleeve lies on top, property of H. Laurel Hart, private. A note in the same hand, smaller. If found, follow the star room, only on a cold night. The star room? Jonah says. His light travels along the rafters and finds 15 feet away a hatch painted the same gray as everything else. The circle and triangle mark is there too, smaller, tucked near the hinge. They lower the hatch. A ladder unfolds with the precise reluctance of a tool that's been waiting to be used. The space they enter is long and narrow, windowed at both ends with louvers cut into the gables and shutters that can be pulled with ropes. A lens sits on a pedestal the way a king sits on a throne, framed by wooden gears and a rack and pinion focus he can't help touching. The floor bears a chalk map of stars. Arcs, names, a sweep of the Milky Way done by a hand that knew the sky like a neighbor. In the corner, under a canvas that whispers when moved, a projector older than both brothers combined, its casing stamped Magnetoscope number 3. Jonah whistles between his teeth. Not just film, he says, almost reverent. A whole room that knew how to love it. They don't know who to call, so they ask the one person in town who always knows who to call. Mrs. Alvarez at the county building listens with her head tipped to the side like she's hearing more than words, then flips through a mental Rolodex and says, "You want Dr. Lena Weaver at the State Historical Society. Knows motion pictures like a preacher knows sins. Be nice, don't open anything else." Dr. Weaver arrives in a silver hatchback that's more dent than paint, hauling a cooler and a duffel full of instruments. She climbs to the loft, stops dead at the edge of the star room and smiles in a way that makes the brothers smile back before they understand why. "You have a barn camera," she says. "A rural camera obscura built to study the sky and to control light. Somebody understood projection and preservation better than most institutions did in 1920. She sniffs the air. "And nitrate. We keep this cold, gentlemen. We keep it calm, and we do not, under any circumstances, pretend it isn't unstable." "Nitrate?" Jonah asks. Dr. Weaver peels a strip off a leader with tweezers, holds it up to a light box. The image, only a frame, then another, flares into being, silver and smoke. A woman stands in wheat, eyes lifted toward a horizon the lens can't see, mouth open like a person hearing music. She looks like nobody, and like everybody. "Nitrate film," Dr. Weaver says. "It's beautiful. It's dangerous. It burns underwater. It will take your barn if you let it warm. But if we handle it right, what you have here might change what people think they know." "What do we have?" Caleb asks. She points to the labels. "If these are what they say, you have a full 6-reel cut of a 1926 lost feature called Prairie Nocturne by Hale Lockwood, the recluse who shot stars onto ceilings in barns and painted light like it was oil. Every archivist on the continent has been looking for it since a warehouse fire ate his catalog in 1931. The outtakes alone could fund a small museum." She pauses, eyes tracking the tidy handwriting on the envelopes. "And you have something else. Hart. Private. Who is H. Laurel Hart?" Caleb glances at Jonah. "Our grandmother's middle name was Laurel." He says it slowly, the taste of the syllables new and old at once. "Helen Laurel Hart. We thought the H stood for Helen. Maybe this time it stands for both." Dr. Weaver's voice softens. "Maybe she wasn't only the farm wife you were told about. Maybe she was the woman in this frame." When they open the envelope marked Hart, private, they find letters on onion skin paper, brittle and translucent. The ink faded to tea brown. The first is dated August 19, 1926. It begins, "My dearest H," and continues in a hand that bends like grass in a good wind. The writer is Hale Lockwood himself. He writes about light and distance, about building a starlight room so he could film by moon and cloud when studios demanded sun. He writes about a woman who could hold still as the planet moves. He writes, "If the world refuses to see what we made, we will teach it later, hide it cold, show it when boys with our name come asking. The letters are a map, Practical, romantic, logistical. Instructions for the generator hidden in the wall, for the louvers meant to pull winter into summer nights, for the chemicals sealed in a crate at the back of the star room labeled, Fixer, do not breathe. The last letter is not dated. It says simply, if I am not there when you open this, know that everything I made worth keeping had your shadow in it. The door at the bottom of the barn stairs creaks. It's only Daisy, Caleb's hound, old enough to pretend she can't hear commands she doesn't like. She looks up as if to say, keep going. What follows is a week of learning a new country. They live in layers of clothing against the cold they pump into the loft. They speak in whispered imperatives learned from Dr. Weaver, humidity, emulsion, shrinkage, off-gassing. They leave their boots at the hatch. They install a cheap wireless sensor that sends an alarm to Jonah's phone if the temperature creeps above the museum's recommended line. They open tins inside the star room only one at a time, and only as long as it takes to log content. Dr. Weaver calls a friend at the regional archive. He drives out with a nitrogen case and a portable scanner that looks like it can read secrets out of bark. They thread 20 feet of prairie nocturne onto the magnetoscope. Dr. Weaver adjusts shutter, focus, speed. The projector hums. The barn holds its breath. Light goes out, then returns organized on the far wall. A world inside the world. A prairie at night. Men and women moving as if their bodies remember a dance no one taught them. Their faces both strange and familiar. The stars above them in the film mapping the same sky above the barn. Helen Laurel Hart, for there is no mistaking her, walks into frame and looks straight through the camera at the men who will open these tins, 100 years later, and learn a new way to say her name. It stops being a find and becomes an awakening. The first conflict is the kind you can't punch. Nitrate film wants to burn the way some men want to run, compulsively, completely. The second conflict is simpler and harder. Summer. The heat drags its chair up to the barn and sits a while. The sensor pings at noon and at dusk. At 2 in the morning when a thermal tide climbs the rafters and licks the tins. The generator hums and hums and hums. Caleb runs a new circuit to spare it. Jonah sleeps badly and wakes with the taste of battery acid in his mouth. Then there's the sky. The letters mention a star room not as a quaint flourish but as equipment. Lockwood calibrated shots by aligning his louvers with specific constellations. To finish a few fragments he left cut but unlabeled. Dr. Weaver needs to know exactly how the room saw the sky in 1926. Cloud and storm complicate that math. A dry night is a ledger entry. A wet one is a smudge. The weather moves through them like a character with its own desires. They find, tucked under a floorboard in the star room, a leather-bound notebook the size of a man's hand. Inside, sketches of a mechanism that isn't in the barn. A clockwork drum with slots and lenses, annotated with angles and dates. Beside it, pasted in with mucilage, a small photograph, sepia, edges deckled, of a metal cylinder standing on a tripod in a field of wheat under a night sky. The scribble beneath reads, Stellar Gate, Prototype B. What else did he build? Jonah asks, not joking. Possibly a timed shutter that syncs to sidereal rotation, Dr. Weaver says. Lockwood was an eccentric and a genius. If he built the gate, or if your grandmother did because these notes aren't all one hand, he could track the sky without the sky smearing his image. The twist waits until they think they've seen all the surprises the barn can hold. It comes in the crate marked, Fixer, do not breathe. They open it last because fear is reasonable. Inside, alongside bottles that will never be opened, lies a shallow tray wrapped in waxed cloth. It's heavier than it looks and cold even without the generator's help. Inside the tray, set side by side in varnished wooden cradles, are 20 glass plates the size of an open book. Caleb lifts one the way he once lifted his child. Habit of carefulness from before there was a reason to be careful. The plate catches light and shows the world beneath the emulsion. A meteor streak above a prairie caught in an exposure long enough to write the fire's path across the sky. Another plate. The same system of stars, but with a dark round bite taken out of one. An occultation. Another. A fuzzy orb and its attendants. Coma fanned, tail carved like a scythe. Comet, as if in a textbook. Holy, Dr. Weaver says, then catches herself and chooses a word that can share air with the dead. History. Lockwood and Laurel didn't just make films. They made the earliest high-resolution glass plate photographs of specific celestial events over the American plains. with accurate timings and coordinates noted in the margins. If the dates match records, some of these plates captured phenomena whose documented observations remain contested or sparse. A meteor procession in 1913, an occultation of Aldebaran, perhaps a graze no one else managed to fix. Science and art on the same emulsion. Not just worth money, Dr. Weaver says, eyes bright. Worth citations. Worth museums building rooms with your grandmother's name over the door. The next discovery changes the way the money might work. Under the last plate, in a hidden pocket as neat as a magician's grin, sits a deed transfer signed by Hale Lockwood and Helen Laurel Hart, bequeathing all rights, physical and intellectual, to the first sons of our sons who ask with care. The legal phrasing is antique, but legible. No court battles, no corporate intrigue, no corruption. Just a promise left in a box placed in a room, wrapped in the cold. The antagonist that remains is the barn itself, with its creaks and its hunger for breath, and the weather, which decides to test the work they've begun with a heat wave. No one remembers seeing this early. 98 in the shade, 102 on the gravel where the hound dances to save her paws. The sensor pings noon and does not stop. The generator labors. The tins shed their patience like coats. They make a plan because plans are what you do when love meets physics. Move the collection to the State Archives cold vault before the day peaks. Do it with nitrogen cases and insulated carriers. Do it with forms and gloves and a route that avoids the county's only roadwork. Do it before the storm building on the horizon decides to refresh its acquaintances. Dr. Weaver's colleague arrives at dawn with 2 more cases and a van with a floor that doesn't flex. They prioritize reels first, then glass plates. The starroom's shutter ropes sing through the pulleys as they seal the louvers and keep the air cold as the surface of a lake in March. Caleb and Jonah carry tins like they once carried babies. Daisy paces, trying to be useful, settling finally into the work only dogs know how to do, keeping worry moving so it doesn't settle into panic. Halfway down the drive, the van's dashboard lights up with an orange icon shaped like a battery losing faith. They limp back to the barn, pop the hood, and meet an alternator with a taste for melodrama. Dr. Weaver swears the way scholars do when they've had to learn practical languages in order to keep old things alive. The nearest parts store is 20 miles away, and the one guy who can be counted on to loan anything to anyone on a Sunday is out baling hay because the weather has rewritten his day too. Plan B, Caleb says. He points at the old truck under the tarp in the first bay, the one with Hart and Sons, haulage and feed faded on its door. It should be a monument. Instead, because someone tended it out of habit long after sensible habit had no audience, it's ready. He cranks. The starter complains, then thinks better of it and complies. The engine catches with a cough and then a low, steady thrum, like a memory remembering. They load the cases into the truck bed and lash them with straps that have seen more hay than history. The sky to the west bruises, heat and storm together, an alliance too familiar in this part of the map. Gravel spits under the tires as they angle toward the county road, then the state route, then the ribbon past the old cannery where the hawks hunt thermals from the roofline. 3 miles from the archive, the storm chooses theater. Rain comes all at once, thick as rope, horizontal, and the wipers, heroic, lose. Lightning sketches the skeleton of the world in brief bone-white frames. The truck floats for a breath and finds purchase again. Jonah leans forward in the passenger seat as if he could reduce drag with desire alone. Dr. Weaver's car is a ghost in the mirror, then a presence, then a rumor, then there again, hazard lights blinking like a pulse. A sycamore, tall and arrogant, decides to lie down across the road. Not fall, lie down. It brings a snarl of wires with it and the world on the far side goes dark. The archive is 2 blocks beyond that quiet, its cold vault full of room and intention, but not reachable without a miracle or a very old truck's willingness to imagine itself amphibious. There's a narrow lane to the right, half alley, half possibility, the kind of cut-through people make when maps disappoint. It snakes behind the feed store and spits between 2 brick backsides into a parking lot that will flood in 5 minutes. Caleb chooses it like he has always known it was part of this day. The truck squeezes between dumpsters that smell like old grain and new rain. Daisy braces and does not complain. A pallet floats by, determined and cheerful. They arrive at the archive's loading bay as a sheet of water leaps from the gutter and slaps the concrete like applause. The back door opens. 2 interns in gloves look 20 and invincible. They help carry cases in a chain of carefulness, Each man and woman a link that knows what it is holding. The vault door rolls aside with the slow dignity of an old god, and the air that comes out is winter. Real winter. February inside June. They place the tins on shelves that know how to be shelves. They log numbers and signs and smells. The glass plates go into drawers lined with foam that gives itself gladly. The barn's breath leaves the brothers' bodies one long exhale at a time. Dr. Weaver lays a palm against a case the way a surgeon touches a patient's shoulder after a good operation. Not ownership, not even pride. Witness. Thunder follows them into the lobby. The lights flicker hard once and then commit to steady. The interns grin at nothing and everything. Daisy shakes rain out of her coat in a gesture that frees the room to laugh. They made it. Not because they were faster than weather. Because they planned. And because an old truck that should have retired didn't. And because a woman who loved images more than comfort convinced a building to be kinder than roads. The State Archive announces an extraordinary find with the kind of caution museums wear like vestments. Measured words. Precise claims. Promises to verify against astronomical records and production documents. News travels across wires that no longer hum and into pockets that do. Film forums argue gently and then jubilantly. A Cinematheque in New York offers a restoration grant big enough to repair barns. A science journal asks for high-resolution scans of the glass plates and offers an honorarium to fund a local exhibit in the Brothers County seat. Lawyers, when invited, nod solemnly at the deed and say the magic words. Clear title. The money starts like a creek after thaw. Quiet, then confident. It isn't a lottery. It's contracts. Royalties divided between image rights and physical artifacts. Insurance policies on boxes packed into vaults that now have a drawer labeled H. L. Hart, Lockwood Collection. The most valuable thing isn't even for sale. The first public screening of Prairie Nocturne in 100 years. On a fall night when the air is apple crisp and the sky above the refurbished barn looks like the one on the film. They hang a sheet on the east wall, run a new safe print while the original sleeps under Pleistocene air downtown, and the valley comes in lawn chairs and blankets, wearing that expression people get when they recognize something they didn't know they were missing. There is one more letter, found weeks later, tucked inside the projector's hollow base, written in a hand that learned to move slower with age. To my boys, it begins, as if it knew exactly who would be reading. You come from a woman who understood that some rooms are meant to hold stars. If what we kept has weight in the world, use it to fix what weather and time undo first. Put roofs over things that leak. Put shade where animals stand. Put music in a place where quiet hasn't been kind. They do that. They fix the barn so it can keep secrets without endangering them. New trusses. Tin that doesn't rattle. A lightning rod that gives storms somewhere polite to go. They build a small pavilion by the creek, with a stage just tall enough for a fiddler and a voice. On Saturdays, the valley's teenagers come to watch silent films with live piano, and sometimes the piano is a recorded score stitched together from field recordings of wind and wheat, and the lowing of cattle at dusk. They hang the star room chalk map behind glass, and let children learn the sky with their fingers. The money pays taxes without complaint. It buys time. It retires the last of the hospital bills with a relief that tastes like clean water. It doesn't undo loss. Nothing does. But it gives grief something to be neighbor to besides debt. On a night that would have been an anniversary if the world had turned differently, Caleb and Jonah sit on the barn's new threshold with Daisy at their feet and watch Prairie Nocturne dance again on the east wall. Helen Laurel Hart turns in a dress that is a poem about grass. She looks at the camera as if it were a person she loved and trusted. She holds that gaze long enough to cross a century and land exactly where her grandsons can catch it. Do you think she planned all of this? Jonah asks, half laughing at the size of the idea. I think she trusted the shape of the world, Caleb says. Trusted that if you keep a room cold and a promise warm, someday somebody will open a door and the light will still work. He sets his cup down on the step. The boards no longer hum, not from a generator, not from nervousness, but from the normal vibrations of a place being used again. The star room is dark, cool, content. The projector sleeps. The plates dream comets. The films breathe in their vault like winter animals. If this story held you, if you could smell the wet hay, hear the rain, feel the heat in the film and the cold in the room, watch the next video queued up for you and subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're watching from. There are more barns with rooms that hold stars, more letters tucked into hollow places, more old machines waiting patiently for the right hands. Here, we tell them. Here, we make sure the light still works.